Well, hey there, hero. Whenever you start something brand spanking new, there is bound to be a feeling of uncertainty, of doubt, of fear. In fact, there's likely going to be more than your average amount of fear when you're starting something really big that's really new to you, really risky in your mind. And this past weekend, I took some time to go online and do a Facebook Live about the three biggest fears that we have and how to vanquish them, especially when we're starting something new. And I got some emails from people saying, hey, you really should make this a podcast episode. So I have done so. So here it is in its entirety, the three biggest fears we have when starting something new and how to kill them, how to destroy them in this episode of the VOHeroes podcast. Well, hey there, hero. It's David H. Lawrence, the 17th. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to spend some time talking about fear. Fear is one of the most debilitating things we experience. It can stop us from getting what we want. It can get us things we don't want. And when we're just about to make a decision on changing something minor or major in our lives, fear can be a real mitigating factor. It can, give us some awesome moments to pause and think about things. And it can also take that a little bit too far to the point where we start to experience inaction. And I've had a lot of people who have asked me a lot of questions all week long as I've been talking about the new VOHeroes Pro program that seem to revolve around fear. I'm an old person. I'm not saying that about myself. I am an old person, but I'm saying I got messages from people saying, I'm old. Can I even do this? I'm a woman. Are there any jobs for women? I'm fearful there's nothing there. My voice isn't good enough. I'm fearful that my voice isn't good enough. And all of these fall into one of three different categories that that give us this pause, this moment of hesitation, and in some cases, completely paralyze us. Before we get started, if you want to just say hello, tell me where you're watching from, tell me who you are, and maybe even tell me what your biggest fear is. I don't know. We're going to get to the three biggest fears, and I'm not going to leave you just hanging with like, well, here you go. There's the three biggest fears. Best of luck to you. But I'm also going to show you three simple ways to address those fears and hopefully minimize or completely eliminate those fears. Today is the final day of registration for VOHeroes Pro, and it's a big commitment. It's a big change. It's a big statement, a big, bold statement to make. If you join us because you're saying, I'm committed, I'm going to do this. I'm not just going to check this off on my bucket list. This is going to be something that is going to make a big difference. So when you do something that big, there is always this feeling of, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the biggest mistake of my life? Am I spending way too much money? What am I going to get? I don't think I'm going to get what it's worth. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to share my screen. It's a little bit harder to share your screen on StreamYard than it is on Zoom, but I'll do my best. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. It's dark, it's black, it's blue, it's blank, but it will be filled shortly. And what I want to talk to you about today is our three biggest fears. And there are plenty of studies about bravery and overcoming fear and setting aside fear. And, fear acts as a safety valve. Fear acts as a protective, sort of preventative against doing stupid stuff. But the big three cover the waterfront in terms of any of the individual fears that we may have. When I mentioned earlier the fear of being too old, or being the wrong gender, or not having a beautiful voice, all of those fall into one or more of these categories. And the first one is that we have a fear of the unknown. This is a natural, common, constant fear that we have. When you're driving your car in a different part of town than you've ever been in before. And I'm not saying a dangerous part of town, just an odd, unfamiliar part of town. And you'll find yourself turning down the radio because you don't want to be distracted by the noise. You'll find yourself scanning constantly because where you are familiar with things, where the things are known, you know where the dangers might be coming from, but here you don't. And so you're constantly scanning. We have this fear of not having a knowledge base that allows us to operate safely. And when it comes to making a change in our lives, oh my gosh, where do you start with how many unknowns there are? Take what I've been doing this past week, and that's providing the opportunity for people to register for my course, my program, my training program. You don't know what the courses are like, although if you took my free course on mastering home-based voiceover, you have a pretty good idea. You don't know what the resources are that you get. You don't know what the community is like. You don't know what the time commitment might be. You don't know if you're going to be good enough to take care of all the things that you need to take care of, just like you may have had the fear of the unknown when you first started fifth grade, or you first started a new job, or you went on a first date. The fear of the unknown can make people stop and go, maybe I'll just stay home and I'll make some macaroni and cheese and I'll watch Law and Order. What do you think about that? Let's do that. That's a lot safer, right? Because in our lives, when we're faced with fear, we have choices. Two of the biggest choices are fighting or flying, fleeing, flight, fight or flight. There's a couple of variations on that I won't use on a Sunday. But the fear of the unknown is one of the most common things that we experience. The second biggest fear that we have is we have a fear of failure. Say we overcome that first fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going on, but okay, we're going to give it a shot. Then you start thinking to yourself, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be able to do this. And usually that happens right before you start, right before you take that first step. You get this fear of failure. And again, totally natural because you don't know what's coming. And you may be asked to do some things that you don't feel qualified to do. You may be asked to push yourself, and you may end up not reaching the goal that you want because you're not all that good at what you're being asked to do. And the funny thing is that stretching yourself like that and failing is actually really, really valuable because it shows you where you need to work on things, or it shows you what not to do, right? So having a fear of the unknown and having a fear of failure, and as it says under the title there, number 3 might just surprise you. Number 3 is not the fear of the unknown, not the fear of failure, but the fear of something that you would think would be celebratory, something that you think would be awesome. And that is, we actually have a fear of success. Say we are good enough to do these things. We are able to handle things that we're not aware of yet, the unknown about things, and we actually excel at what we do. Well, now, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm stuck? I have to do this for the rest of my life? Does this mean, does this mean that, all the rules are going to change? Yeah, it does. And that can bring real fear into people's lives. If they actually do well at something, well, now there's no excuse. What if I fail in the future? What if people start to consider me an expert and start coming at me and asking me questions about what I'm doing? The fear of success is something that has been looked at as kind of that poor stepchild fear, based on fear of the unknown and fear of failure. But it's becoming more and more and more likely that you will face this as you acquire skills and as you acquire familiarity with new situations. Those top three fears can be debilitating. And that number three is often the one that's the most hidden, the most unfamiliar, the least expected. Really? A fear of success? Especially when you start to have some early wins. It's like, wow, I really could be good at this. What does this mean? What is this going to do? And what's going to change in my life? Right? So much so that there is a quote that is often misattributed to Nelson Mandela, but it's actually a quote from a book written by Marianne Williamson. And it's a quote that talks about the fear of success. And here's what it says. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small doesn't serve the world. And that was written by Marianne Williamson in her book, A Return to Love. I'm going to pause my sharing here for just a second. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about these things with me via the chat. So below this video, tell me what your thoughts are about this so far. And we have a small group today. If you want to share this with your friends and let them know what's going on, if you want to, give me a like, give me a clap, give me a follow. Thank you, Masato. I appreciate that very much. And thank you, Mark. I appreciate you saying it's a surprise to see me. Well, it's not that early here. What is it? A little past 11 on the West Coast of America. Masato has a question. Out of these fears, how will you and your coaches help your students move past them? Well, I'm not even going to wait until you've joined VOHeroes Pro. Thank you for doing that. I'm not even going to wait until you start taking your courses, but you'll see, as you already have, that the courses in VOHeroes Pro are designed to start with the basics, layer more complicated and more intricate things on top of it. The courses themselves are built that way, but the entire curriculum is built that way as well, giving you the basics first and then adding those things that fill in the gaps around those. So that's one thing. And then also you're going to find that the community itself, the coaches for sure, me for sure, but the community itself is really supportive, and they share with you the notions of that fear. And when we get into the rest of the very short slide set that I have for you this morning, when you get to vanquishing those fears, killing those fears, destroying those fears. Let me use a football analogy: tackling and three and out those fears. Right? You're going to find that we've built the entire curriculum around that. So I'm trying to imagine what life would be like if we didn't have fear. And I'm trying to imagine that only because fear is actually useful. It stops us from doing things that are stupid, at least for a moment. That's the whole point. When you go back to, less developed times, caveman times, fear was an important tool because a lot about the world was unknown. Now we know a lot more about the world than we did then. But then, you can only imagine what it was like as a nomad going to a new part of the world, a new part of even the continent that you were on. What about the first time people saw a change in weather or a change in the environment, or a change in geographical location, going from arid to the sea? Oh my, what is this big thing that's blue and wet, right? So everything contained some aspect of fear to give you pause and say, okay, let's take a look at this before we do anything rash. Let's take a look at this. Let's see what's going on, right? And you would watch other people do things that you were considering doing. And if it was a failure that they ended up engaging in, well, that gave you even more fear. It's like, okay, is this what I really want to do? They didn't do so well with that. Is this what I want to do? So remember the three big fears: fear of the unknown, fear of failure, and actually fear of being successful. And I want to go back to our slides for just a moment and move from this quote from Marianne Williamson to actually vanquishing these fears. So we know what the top three fears are, and they're very big, broad categories. The actual thing that you think you're afraid of, that's valid, but you're likely able to put that in one of those three buckets. Are there any jobs for women? Well, that's a fear of the unknown. It's not necessarily a fear of failure because you haven't even done anything yet, but it may be a failure of opportunity. But it's also a failure of success. Oh, there are opportunities for women. Oh, now I've got one less excuse to move forward and do what I want to do. And if voiceover is what you want to do, the reason I'm here today is to talk about these fears and how they relate to this moment of moving forward and really addressing the joy and the excitement and the yearning that you have to be a voiceover talent. I love watching people blossom, overcoming these fears and really succeeding. And I get it when people start feeling these fears after having some moments of success. Okay, well, that's that. But, okay, I set up my microphone, but now I got to actually do a commercial. Now I actually have to do an audition. Now I have to actually edit an audio book. I can't tell you how many fears I have around that. So let's talk about some ways to vanquish these big fears. Now, these are things that when I share them with you, what I don't want you to do is go, oh yeah, I knew that. Because if you knew that, you'd use them. And maybe you do. But if these are something that you go, oh, right, by the way, I knew that, I've reminded you of something that may not pop into your head the moment that you're facing a fear. So just bear with me, have an open mind, and let me take you down this path. These are three things that you can always do to take a look at vanquishing a fear, at destroying a fear. And the first one is to do this: question your assumptions and do your best to get out of the silo. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, when you're looking at fear and you don't have enough information about the situation that you're faced with, you start to go back to what you think is right or what you've been told is right, or what you've heard on the internet is right. And so you have a set of assumptions. I'm older. That must necessarily be a bad thing when it comes to voiceover. I mean, I'm just assuming that's the case, right? That's the case, right? Well, no, it's not right. The advantage that someone who's older has over someone who's younger is this incredible amount of experience in life that they've had, the ability to draw on their past, whereas somebody who's young and beautiful and an influencer on Instagram, they've got that to rely on. I don't know how many times in the last couple of weeks I've heard people say something like, hey, kids, this was that, right? And when you're old, like I am, you get to draw on those things. I always say to people, man, if I had it to do all over again, I'd have come out to LA a lot faster, a lot sooner. I would have overcome my fear of going out into the unknown and my fear of failure and whatever fear of success that I may have had, and come here in the 80s when I was 20. And I would have changed that a little bit. But then I think to myself, well, if you'd done that, David, who knows what your path in life would have been? You're assuming that it would have been better. You're assuming so much, but your life hadn't happened yet. So all the things that helped you succeed when you moved out here in the early 2000s, well, those maybe wouldn't have happened, right? So when you're beginning to base your judgment on a moment of fear and you start to base your judgment on what you think is right, question that. Question your assumptions. And what I mean by get out of the silo is that when we start to assume things, we want those things to be reliable. We want those things to be strong. And so we begin to perhaps suffer from something called confirmation bias. If someone tells us something that makes sense, well, then it must be true. And we tend to position ourselves around people that offer things that we think are true and seem to be correct. And we start to form this group in this silo that prevents us from getting any sort of input or alternate opinions or other ways of doing things from outside the silo. I've got a situation going on right now where somebody in one of the audiobook groups that I'm in here on Facebook is hell-bent to make himself correct and me wrong about a particular aspect of voiceover. I'm happy to just simply disagree, but this person is determined to prove that he's right and I'm wrong, because in his silo, what he says makes sense to him. What he says is provable and the only possible way to go. And it's very rare that there's only one possible way to go with anything. But if you're in that silo, you're being reinforced by all those people around you. And maybe your assumptions are being supported, even if they're not the best path to take. So just take a moment as you face something and question what you're thinking about that moment of fear. The fear of the unknown could have hundreds of assumptions associated with it. And that silo that you're in could be deafening in terms of the volume, right? So question your assumptions and get out of your silo. That's going to help you only because it's going to give you a moment to say, is that really true? Is that something that I know to be fact? Or is that assumption that I've made something that somebody just told me? And maybe I trust that person, or maybe I value that person's success, their success, so they must know what they're talking about. So question your assumption. Remember that moment of trust, because we're going to come back to that. So question your assumptions and get out of the silo. Number 2, do your research in a way that is real research, not just looking for things you agree with. Solid, open to the possibilities research is not going online or talking to your friends and only waiting until you find someone who agrees with those assumptions in number one, or live in the silo with you in number one. It is looking at all the options. What does this faction of people say? What does that faction of people say? And not just politically or emotionally looking at something and immediately tossing it out if it doesn't make sense to you, but really thinking to yourself, could this be a possibility? Could this be something that actually makes a difference as I'm looking at this? Now, I'm going to stop for a moment and I'm going to say to you, I can't see if you're commenting right now because my screen is shared with my deck. I don't know how this is landing for you, but I can tell you that this can happen as you approach a moment of fear in a blink of an eye. In some cases, you're going back through the catalog in your head of things that you've already researched, that you've already taken a look at and thinking, I wonder if this works. But number two is about expanding the reach of your research. Scientists set up a hypothesis, right? They say, we think this is what's going to happen. We think this is why what we're researching happens. They set up a hypothesis, and then they don't try to guide their experiment toward confirming their hypothesis. They simply create an experiment that either gives them results that match their hypothesis or give them results that don't match their hypothesis. And if they get results that don't match their hypothesis, they're scientists. They're not politicians. They're not arrogant and deciding, okay, well, that didn't match, so that must mean my experiment was wrong. It may not be. It may be that what you find doesn't agree with what you assumed. And if you can be open to that, there's a very good chance that once you find the things that you can rely on, you can understand, you can make sense of, despite what your peers in the silo may be saying, you can use that to assuage and vanquish your fears. And we're artists. So we have this inner thing about being different, about stepping out. There's a phrase that I use every month when we do our accountability meetings with VOHeroes, where we talk about your business and we talk about the technology, we talk about your mindset. And by the way, this is all about mindset, right? We have what are called thought starters. And one of the thought starters one month that I used was, remember, you weren't born to fit in. You were born to stand out. And you know this. You've spent your whole life being different. You've spent your whole life being that kid and that guy or that woman. You've spent your whole life marching to the beat of a different drummer. Maybe it's slightly different. Maybe it's really different. But you are an outlier because you're an artist. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. So think about the idea that you could do solid, open to anything, open to the possibilities. Just let me know what's going on. Research from sources that you can trust, from sources that make sense, and let that be a guide towards potentially lessening, lowering, ameliorating, or completely getting rid of your fear. And then number three, and this is somewhat difficult because I've mentioned it a couple of times, the difficult part is knowing who this might be, and that is consult with someone you trust. Doing this on your own, doing anything that is causing fear on your own, is the most difficult path to follow. But consulting with someone you trust. And I have people who consult with me and my coaches all the time because we've earned their trust. We have said, here's what we think. Here's how we demonstrate why it works. And this is why we teach what we do. What are your thoughts? We look at how people have a life and want to live that life with voiceover as part of that life. And we help them achieve that. And we do so in a way that doesn't cost them a lot of money, that is asynchronous, meaning they can study with us whenever they want. They can take their monthly workouts at many, many different times of day and days of the week and with different coaches. We do our best to not only build that trust, but maintain that trust all throughout the process. And if you've seen the video on our registration page over at VOHeroes.com/2021, if you've seen the video there and watched some of our past and current VOHeroes pros talk about how we teach, what we teach, how we support them, and so on, the one message that seems to come through all the way through that montage of people is finding someone they can trust. And when you do that, you can talk about your assumptions and you can say, hey, are we in an echo chamber here? Are we in a silo? Like, is there other things out there that we should know about that might take care of this? You know, have you done any research? What do you do in these situations? Why do you do what you do in these situations? So, questioning your assumptions, getting out of the silo, doing solid, open to possibilities research, and consulting with someone you trust. These are things that I think cover 90% of the fears that you might have. Masato says, ha, I stand out like a sore thumb. Yeah, well, you know, I remember when I was a kid, this would happen to me all the time, and it kind of gave me a little bit of a complex. People would say, why are you like this? Why are you doing this? Why do you think that way? And it kind of gave me, you know, a bit of pause from time to time. Like, why am I like this? Why do I sit in my bedroom and listen to George Carlin records and try and imitate George Carlin's best lines? You know, why am I doing this? Why did I sit in front of the television on the floor watching a movie with Jackie Gleason who had no lines because he was playing a deaf mute? Why did that movie, Gijo, make me cry and make me laugh? And why did I notice that that was happening rather than just being entertained by it? That was one of the first things that made me realize that I was drawn to the arts, drawn to the performing arts. So yeah, we step out. Mark Ballou says, this a regular Sunday thing for you? Didn't know, just saw a notification on my phone. I'm a longtime VO actor reinventing my career after a long hiatus and love what you offer. Just started your 5-part series the other day. In another life, I was your DGA trainee on Heroes. Really? Really? So I remember Andre was a DGA trainee on the very first episode that I did. Andre, who played the guy with the voids, the villain with the voids. He and I had done some other things together. And yeah, so that's great. That's fantastic. No, it is not a regular Sunday morning thing for me. I'm doing this very specifically, bald-faced, because today is the last registration day of VOHeroes Pro for 2021. And this year we're doing something different. And this year, tonight at midnight, when registration stops, you have about 12 plus hours to do it. If you want to join us, it goes away. And it doesn't come back until September of 2022. Previously, I would just let people join whenever they wanted. And I realized how much work that was for me. Whereas now, me and my team were concentrated on getting everybody in. You get economies of scale when you're matriculating people as a group. And I just want to concentrate on the cohort, the students that show up now and become part of the course now. I want to concentrate on them and not be distracted by people joining and having to catch them up. And like, it's distracting. And so this year it all goes away. And people have said all throughout the week, I'm fearful that I won't be successful. I will be successful. I don't know what to expect. A lot of specific fears about failure, about not being prepared, not being able to get prepared, things like that. So that's why I'm here. Yeah, that's the deal there. Let's see what else we've got here. All right. I don't think there's anything else. Masato says it's fun being just a little quirky. Yeah. So it's interesting because Masato, I'm going to ask you a question if I could get some permission from you. And I know there's a delay between when I start talking and when you hear it. But before you joined, you sent me an email that really made it clear how you had been mistreated in the past and how you were fearful of putting your trust in somebody again. And it was indicative of the kinds of emails that I've been getting from people in the past. And I'm wondering if I could share a little bit more detail, not mentioning names or anything like that. And I see your thumbs up, but I don't think that's for what I'm asking now. I just want to share a little bit about what I said. And if you mind if I do that. So I'll wait for you to say it's okay to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to, give any details or anything, but I want to talk about what you asked and how I responded. So okay, Masada said that's fine. Okay, so he sent a note to me saying, why, for all intents and purposes, why should I study with you? What do you have that this group over here that ripped me off before has that's different? Tell me why I should study with you. And in a way, kind of saying, sell yourself to me. And my response was, knowing that this was fear talking. This was fear of the unknown. This was fear of wasting money. This was fear of wasting time and effort and energy. This was, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. The first F's on you, the second F's on me, if you know that phrase, right? And I could sense that in what he said. And my answer to him wasn't, well, we do this and we do that and blah, blah, blah. My answer to him was, I'm not going to carry the baggage that somebody else has handed you. I don't sell myself. I don't beg people to be part of what I do. I demonstrate what I do, as I did this past week, as Mark had noted. I demonstrate what I do in terms of how I teach, what I teach, the methods that I created and that I use when I teach, and that's it. I don't want anybody. I don't want anybody to be like Groucho Marx. I don't want anybody to be a member of my club that doesn't want to be in the club, right? And it's a slightly mangled version of what he said. He said, I don't want to be a member of a club that would have me. But what I don't want to do is say, oh, you really should join our club because no matter what, you're going to fit in just great. And we're so different from all these other people. I have no idea what happened to you, Masato, or to anybody who's watching this either live or on a replay who have been mistreated, who have been, dealt with by people that you couldn't trust or who violated your trust. I'm hoping that when you see me demonstrate what I do, as Masato has, because he's one of our new VOHeroes Pros, that it's a pretty clear indication that you can consider what I have to say and, question your assumptions, because there's a lot of people who have looked at how I teach and what I teach and they go, wow, this isn't what other people say. Are you full of it? Or are you just like, a different approach to things? And, I think the proof is in the pudding. I use everything that I teach in my voiceover career every single day. And when I find something new that works better than what I'm teaching, I change what I'm teaching. I did that with Punch and Roll. and my stair-step method. That's exactly what's going on right now when I mentioned earlier that somebody's trying to make sure that they're right and I'm wrong. It's a sort of a debate over the efficiency of what I teach versus the efficiency of what he teaches. And my reaction is kind of like, what does it matter? You teach what you teach, I'll teach what I teach, and we'll help all of our students at the same time. I'm not sure why it's so important to prove that I'm wrong and you're right, or that you're right and nobody else is right, or I don't know what the point is. But I want to be open to those possibilities. I want to consider other things, which is what I did when I started. I'm like, wait a minute, how long do I have to go with this really expensive microphone and fighting the fact that I'm not in a perfect recording environment? What can I do to change things about that? And how can I share that with others? You know, when I'm building demos for clients, how can I remove that moment from a casting director or casting entity of some sort where they think immediately, oh, this is manufactured. This couldn't have ever aired. How can I help them over that hump so that they hear your talent or my talent and not think to themselves, this was mechanically created, even though it was? Some of my clients do have what are called portfolio demos, where they've had so much stuff that's on the air that we've taken pieces of that and put it in their demos. But 99% of the demos that we create are created out of whole cloth. But what we do is make them sound so natural and so authentic that it removes that moment where the casting director is like, okay, what am I going to hear here? Am I just going to hear somebody talking over music? What am I going to hear here? You know, we spend a lot of time making sure that we look at all the different possibilities. We look at all the different options, and then we share with our students those options that are the best. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it up here. If you have questions, I'm going to give you an opportunity to put some questions in the chat. If you're watching on replay, be sure to tag me so that I come back to this and let you know. And let me just share with you that while you're putting questions in, if you're putting questions in, that registration for VOHeroes Pro, which is my whole curriculum of courses, live workouts on a monthly basis, live accountability sessions on a monthly basis, the equipment, the gear, you get the gear as part of what's going on. The gear that I use in my voiceover practice, the discussion group, the community that we've created, the labs area where we extract videos from each of the courses so that if you can't remember how to create a profile on ACX, we've got a video for that. If you can't remember how to set your microphone so that your earbuds are balanced for when you're recording versus when you're playing back, we have a video for that. And there's, you know, an incredible set of resources, plus a bunch of bonuses, including copies of Rehearsal Pro, copies of Audio Cupcake. There's a sort of a side course called Believe, which really dives deep into limiting beliefs that can hold us back, limiting beliefs that are mostly revolving around fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of success. And so if you want to make voiceover a part of your performance quiver, or if you want to take a practice that you're already doing in voiceover and you're not happy with the level of success that you have, and you want to see if there's some adjustments you can make, some new things you can learn, some new ways to approach the workflow of voiceover, some new categories to do work in, some new ways to get your mindset together, VOHeroes Pro is for you. If you have no desire to do voiceover whatsoever, and you're only here because you saw me talking about fear on social media, well, I'm glad you're here, and hopefully it's helped you. But VOHeroes Pro is not for you. So don't go to voheroes.com/2021 and check it out. So This is let me just see what Masato says here. Oh my God, the stair step is so helpful. I'm actually really pleased I joined. What I've learned in the last 2 courses have helped me remaster my audiobook much more efficiently and productively than I have in the past. So Masato was one of the very first people to join earlier in the week. And already he's taking courses, because you can take the courses in the program anytime you want. Certainly you can take them during the day, but you wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and you don't know how to do documentary narration, and the only thing that's going to let you go back to sleep is learning how to do documentary narration. Well, you can take an hour and do that if that's what you want to do. It's asynchronous. You can take the courses whenever you want. Mark says, now I'm compelled to cram the 5-parter so I can get a good sense of how you operate. Thank you for the good VO vibes. Well, great. Thank you, Mark. And lovely to touch base with you after you being on Heroes and working as a DGA trainee. That's the Directors Guild of America. They have people who shadow the directors that direct episodes on television to learn the craft. So that's great. All right. So I don't think there are any more questions. I hope you got something out of this morning. I hope also that if you have a fear about moving forward with something that you really think is going to make a difference in your life, that you really think is going to just give you all kinds of joy, and that thing is voiceover, I would love to be your guide. I would love to be your mentor. I would love to help you through that process and minimize the fear by presenting you with things that you can trust, that may be, outside the realm of your assumptions, maybe outside your silo. But I'd like to make sure that you get the best possible support in your quest to be a satisfied and successful and profitable voiceover talent. I'm David H. Lawrence, the 17th. I thank you so much for watching, and we're going to end it right there. Leave your comments below, and I'll tag me, and I'll come back and I'll check them out. Have a great Sunday.